Okay, gewaltig. So yesterday we started the Mishnah about mitzvahs hatluyos ba'aretz, and we were probing what is the definition of mitzvahs hatluyos ba'aretz. And the Gemara said that mitzvahs hatluyos ba'aretz has nothing to do with, if it says a lashon of kisavay al aretz in relation to it. It actually has to do with the structure of the mitzvah itself. And if the mitzvah is something that's done on your guf, like Shabbos, Lulav, Esrog, but these are all things that are not tluis baritz, so totally in the guf. Tluis baritz means it's land related. It's something to do with the agriculture, with planting and so forth. Those are the things that are noig only baritz. Then we got up to the point where the Gemara was probing the Mishnah that says the exception to the rule that mitzvahs hatluyis baretz are only noheges baretz are orla klayim, which we know both orla and klayim are noig b'chutz la'aretz, and in the Gemara we're going to have a discussion as to where we know that from. And then Rabbi Eliezer adds to it af hachada. We're not sure what list Rabbi Eliezer is adding this to. Af hachadish is a mitzvah hatluyis baretz, and it's not nogeya b'chutz la'aretz. Or Af HaChadosh is also added to the list of Chutz Min Arlo Klayim, meaning that it is Noig even the Chutz La'aretz. This is our big question. Are we makpid on Chodesh or not? Is Chodesh Noig nowadays? There's another shaila to discuss, and that is Chodesh Noig by Goyim? So Tosfos says by us that Chodesh is Noig on the produce of Goyim, and Chodesh is noig even b'chutz la'aretz. And because of that, and many Rishonim agree with Tosfos, that in fact Chodesh should apply nowadays to us, even though we're buying our wheat or products made of wheat that are all Goyish owned wheat. Most of them nowadays probably belong to Bill Gates, right? He owns most of the farmland in the West, but Chodesh would still be Nageya. And it's all, of course, chutz la'aretz, and that's why the Gedolei Poskin, the Shulchan Aruch Paskins lesser. But it's brought down that the Baal Shem Tov wanted to take on that chumrah by Chassidim, that they should. I'm not sure if they were called Chassidim in those days, in the days of the Baal Shem, but from his Talmidim he wanted to institute that they should be makpid on Chodesh. And supposedly the legend has it is that the Bach came to him in a dream and said, "How dare you?" The Bach said that yes, Tosfos says it's noig by goyim, and yes, Tosfos says it's noig in chutz la'aretz. But who said it's noig in chutz la'aretz by goyim? Maybe there it's not again. And he said, "How dare you go and cast suspicion on all the previous generations that were not makbid on chodosh in chutz la'aretz?" And because of that, the Baal Shem backed down. And the Bach is one of the main shittas that developed the Soimachan not to eat chodosh nowadays. I'm sorry, not to be makpid on chodosh nowadays, and not to be makpid on chodosh. The Ramah also has a limud zchus, which is a limud zchus that's very difficult for us to understand, and he says it's a svek sveka. Sofik if it's this year's crop or last year's crop, and even if it's this year's crop, maybe it took root before Pesach. That's really one sofik, right? So that's why the Ramah does state this as a mokom lahakel, but these are the main two reasons why people are mekel. Nowadays, it's even more difficult to appreciate the Ramah sveka, because nowadays it might not be known, but it's not a suffix by any means. Using serial numbers today, every Litvak can tell you exactly when every box of cereal was planted because of the serial numbers, right? They always put out these Yosy alerts of what serial number you have to have on your box. I didn't grapple with it, but nowadays everyone's makbid on Yoshan, and could be nowadays vibalt. It's so much easier to be makbid on Yoshan because it's very easy for us to find products that are Yoshan. A, B is it's much easier to find out. Could be even the Gedolei Poskin would have been machmer nowadays. They were talking about in their days where things were much harder. But do we still have the Bach, who's very, and the Bach writes, well, you think I just made up my heter? I heard of it the sugi when I was learning Kiddushin in my youth. When I was learning Kiddushin on Mazai, I heard of it the sugis, and based on what I came out, mashma pashas from the Rishonim. Besides Tosfos, it's mashma from the Rishonim that if it's a goyish product and it's chutz laretz, it should be allowed. And I went and discussed it with my Rebbe, the Maral Mifrak, and he agreed to me. So it's a good solid heter. And how dare you, Baal Shem, try to make everybody be makbid on? So that's the big story when it comes to Chodesh. Okay. Today, every pizza shop knows what Chodesh is, right? Yosy is. Okay, so we had a shaila when Rabbi Eliezer was arguing with the Tanakam in the Mishnah, and he said, Afa Chodesh, was he saying Afa Chodesh is mutter or Afa Chodesh is usher? And that's the last thing that we learned yesterday towards the bottom of Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. Let me see if I can get a reference. It's probably about 15 lines from the bottom. He's arguing Lakula, and he's saying Chodesh is only relevant in Eretz Yisrael. The Moishav la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva. And the question hinged on, it says Moishav. It uses a lotion of Moishavos when it discusses these halachos, and Moishavos could mean Moishavos wherever you are in the world, which would include Chodesh anywhere in the world. But Moishavos could also mean only in Eretz Yisrael, but it's not the mitzvah didn't become triggered until Yerusha v'Yeshiva, which is after Yeshua had already distributed to each family their individual parcel of land. Umay af akamaisa. When Rabbi Eliezer said also Chodesh, he wasn't adding Chodesh to the list of Orla and Klayim. That's Chayiv. He was adding Orla and Chodesh to the list of the Tanakama who says that does not apply in Chutz Laretz. Toshma, the Amar Abaye. We're going to prove at least what Abaye held, because Abaye asked the following question: Mantana, the Polagalei, the Rabbi Eliezer. Who argues in Rabbi Eliezer? Who's our Tanakama who says that Orla and Klayim are not relevant in Chutz Laretz? Abaye, Rabbi Shmoli, it's a Tana of Rabbi Shmuel. And Rashi fills us in with some information about Rabbi Shmuel. The Shme'inin Lei, we heard the Omar Moishav la'achar Yerusha v'Yeshiva. So once again, Rashi's reminding us the entire machloikis depends on when it says Moishav Seichem in reference to a mitzvah. Does that mean wherever you might live in the world, or does that mean only in Eretz Yisrael? But it's adding. It's not just when you come into Eretz Yisrael. It's after you're completely settled and everyone has their own individual parcel of land. And therefore, therefore the Tanakama holds that Chodesh is only noig in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Eliezer came to argue, and he said, all three things, Orla, Klayim, and Chodesh apply equally in Chutz Laretz. Based on this, clearly, Rabbi Eliezer is arguing l'chumra when he says afachad. The Tana we learned l'lamdacha teaches us shekol mokim shenemar by Moishav. What it means is eina elo la'achar Yerusha v'Yeshiva divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel said related to Nesachim, and we'll have to learn Rashi because the Gemara is going to do a deep dive into Nesachim soon. But Rabbi Shmuel's opinion is that when the Torah says Moishav Seichem in reference to a mitzvah, it doesn't mean to say that mitzvah is relevant in Chutz Laretz. It's relevant to tell us that the mitzvah is only noig once we're settled. What does Nesachim, which we do in the Beis HaMikdash, have to do with everywhere in the world? Zok Rashi, very simple. It was a question of, do Nesachim apply by Bameish Yachid? So it's a long Rashi, but it's very important for the sugya. It's referring to the Parsha of Nesachim, the Parsha Shlach Lecha. The Chsivit says, Ki savoyu el eretz Moishav Seichem. Exactly our discussion. What does Moishav Seichem mean when it's talking in reference to Nesachim? Vasisam Ishel Hashem, that's where it talks about Nesachim. The Yol of Rabbi Shmuel b'Shchilas Chachim, in Mesechas Chulin, Rabbi Shmuel talks about Mikra, the loy ba hakasuv elo la'atinchem Nesachim l'bamas sibur. The pasuk in Shlach is not discussing that Nesachim are ever required when you bring a carbon on your private bama. It's only referring to bamas sibur, such as the Beis HaMikdash, Mishkan Shilai. Never did the Torah mean to mandate Nesachim on your private carbon that you would bring on a bama yochid. V'nafkalei, how does he know this? B'dichsiv asher ani noisein lochem. The pasuk says in reference to Nesachim, asher ani noisein lochem, meaning bebama hanoheges lekolchem akosav pedav. So that's the anchor. Asher ani noisein lochem tells us, defines with clarity, Nesachim are only ever relevant by a bama shel tzibur. Therefore, if it's only negayah by bama shel tzibur, you have no choice in how to understand what Moishav means. Cannot possibly mean you'll never find a bama shibur anywhere but in Eretz Yisrael. So since as an anchor, Rabbi Shmuel assumes that the whole parasha of Nesachim is only ever relevant in Eretz Yisrael, so b'chol Moishav in that context surely cannot mean anywhere in the world. Yeah, you could have a bum anywhere. No, when it was allowed anywhere. You could have your own private bama. Ella, the way Rabbi Shmuel is understanding that bamas, Nesachim are only relevant at the big bama, a communal bama, which could only have been in Eretz Yisrael. Lahai Moishav, Dichsiv, Asa Krala Shminon, the Af Bebamas Gilgal, Shayish Mizbech and the Choshes in Gilgal, that was also in Eretz Yisrael. But it was when the Mishkan was set up in Gilgal, where there was a Mizbech and the Chosh. And that wasn't just a regular Mishkan. The walls were brick. It was a block wall. It was a permanent structure. Kol Yudalit Shana Shekivshu V'Chelkim. For 14 years, the main Mishkan was in Gilgal, but it was before the land was fully settled, and everyone had their private land. The Hibama Sibur, that was a Bama Sibur. That's lo nischayvu b'nesachim. So the pool of Bamos that are relevant to Nesachim are only a Bama Gedolah. Moishav says only Bamos that are relevant after the land had been fully split up and settled, to tell us that in Gilgal they were no Nesachim brought. Alva Mishabol the Shiloi, but once they came to Mishkan Shiloi, was the Hainu Achar Yerusha Yeshiva. That was already after everyone had their own independent individual parcel of land. That's when the Schayvu b'Nesachim. That's where there was a chiyuv to bring Nesachim, and of course only on the Bama Gedolah, only on the main Mizbeach. V'shuv loy pasku Nesachim yipamei Sibur. After the chiyuv of Nesachim were triggered at that point, 14 years after they came into their Yisrael, it never stopped. From then on, we always required Nesachim. Fa'afilim mishachar v'shiloi v'isabama Sibur b'noi v'givain. Even there, Nesachim were required. And in that context, we understand what the Gemara is quoting here. It teaches us, everywhere you find in the Torah, where it says Moishav, it doesn't mean to tell you that this mitzvah applies everywhere in the world. It just means that this applies only in Eretz Yisrael, but only once everyone received already their individual parcel of land. Since the Torah tells us that it's negeah only by a Bama Gedolah, Shmamina, that gives us no other way to understand Moishav Dichsiv b'Nesachim is lav kol makom masna, can't mean everywhere else. Then kain havel Bamas Yochid, and that's just b'chol makom just heter Bamas. So that is the anchor of Rabbi Shmuel Shita, which has a massive impact b'chol Torah kula, because Rabbi Shmuel will be very megal because of it. Because every time it says Moishav is anywhere in the Torah, it means to tell us that this is a mitzvah tluyus ba'aretz. It only applies in Eretz Yisrael, but even then it only applies once everyone got their individual land. Rabbi Kiva is Machmer. Rabbi Kiva is the one in our Mishnah who says, Afachadosh. Amar Rabbi Kiva, Hare Shabbos. How could you say this? By Shabbos it says, Moishavos. It says, Leisavaru Eish, B'chol Moishvay Seichem. And we know Shabbos is Nahegis Bein Baris Bein B'chutz La'aretz. So you have to be sure, according to your logic, that whenever it says Moishavos, it only is relevant in Eretz Yisrael, we should never have a Chiv Shabbos at all, B'chutz La'aretz. And Rashi adds, once I'm proving to you from Shabbos that Moishav Seichem means anywhere in the world, well, then the halacha of Nesachim should apply everywhere as well. And therefore, by definition, it must be a Bamas Yochid, and the Heges B'chol Moishav is a custom with Aber, because there is no such thing as a Bamas Tzibur out of Eretz Yisrael. V'hai detalya b'vias aretz. So why is it detalya b'vias aretz? Because it's kisavoy. The lashon in the pasuk kisavoyu alerts Moishav Seichem. What does it have to do with kisavoyu? It's relevant even before we come into Yisrael. Hachi Gamar. Ad achshav hayisem b'mishkan shabamis nasru Till now, we had a Mishkan. During the period of the Mishkan, Bamas were usher. V'adayin lo yikraftim nesachim el b'bamasibur. And you were only bringing nesachim on your bamasibur up until that point. Mushitavayu la'aretz. The reason why up until now, you only brought nesachim and bamasibur is that's all you had. But Mushitavayu la'aretz told you Dal Chada, before Mishkan Shiloh was established. And you were living in Gilgal at the time. Trudin b'machama. We were busy. You were busy fighting wars and dealing with taking over the land. The Kaima launch of Hutra Bamas. And we know at that point, Bamas were allowed. There, Bakasim Zelam Denu, Kisavoyu al Aretz, who say Bamas Yachid Muteres, and now Bamas Yachid are allowed. Afi to Titan Yisachim, who will also require Nisachim, Bachi Isa Bizva. So, Frank Rabbi Kiva, from Shabbos, you see Moishav Seichem means everywhere. Amar Lei, so Rabbi Shmuel said, Shabbos, we don't learn out of Moishav Seichem. Shabbos Kal V'chomer also. There's a Kal V'chomer to tell us that Shabbos applies everywhere in the world. Ma mitzvahs kalos no hegos. Bein be'eretz ben chutz la'aretz. Madich many mitzvahs apply. Sign eretz sign chutz la'aretz that aren't such severe mitzvahs. Shabbos chamira, Shabbos which is chomer de halacha as a skila. Like Koskin, surely it should apply everywhere. So it's not by Moishav Seichem that we're learning. So now that we have a biased perspective, it'll become clear to us what Rabbi Eliezer is. Mida Amar Abaye, Mantana, the Polygaled Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Shmuel, from the fact that Abaye said that Rabbi Shmuel is arguing Rabbi Eliezer, and then Rabbi Kiva holds like Rabbi Eliezer, Shmamino, Rabbi Eliezer, Shmamino. Rabbi Shmuel said it only applies in Eretz Yisrael because it's Moishav Seichem. Rabbi Eliezer obviously holds that it applies even in Chutz La'aretz because he learns Moishav Seichem like Rabbi Kiva that it means everywhere. So now we know Rabbi Eliezer is arguing Michti. Rabbi Shmuel Ahechakle. Where did Rabbi Shmuel's main flagship Kiddush come from that Moishav Seichem means only in Eretz Yisrael? He learned it from the Sachem, and the Sachem. But in the Sachem, it doesn't just say Moishav Seichem, it says Kisavayu El Eretz Moishav Seichem. So there's a double lashon. It has a lashon of Kisavayu, and it has a lashon of Moishav Seichem. So Oiva Zoyfrek the Gemara. I have to turn 4 pages because I'm in the Masifta Gemara. You get free arm exercise when you learn in the Masifta Gemara. Bia u'Moishav tzibru. By Nesachim, it says both Bia and Moishav. Zok Rashi, and therefore, Vechi Aleph Minei Moishav v'lo Bia. How could you tell me that if it says Moishav Seichem by a mitzvah, but it doesn't say Kisavayu, how could you even stretch it there to say that it will only be relevant in Eretz Yisrael? Dil mahai de mefarish be pias aretz hu delay boy lemeimar kol makom shatam yosh. If it says kisavayu, then you can't learn Moishav Seichem means wherever you are. Of a Moishav b'loibiyah, but if it just says Moishav Seichem, maybe emalach afilu chutz la'aretz. Maybe that means it includes chutz la'aretz as well. So Lelamed, you're right. So kol makom shneimar bia u'Moishav. Your point is taken. In fact, it has to say both. Also, Rabbi Shmuel Lashmina, and by Chodosh, Rabbi Shmuel is telling us a Kiddush. In the parish of Chodosh, it does say Kisavayu, and therefore Rabbi Shmuel holds Chodosh only applies in Eretz Yisrael. So then let's understand Rabbi Kiva. Amalei Rabbi Kiva, Harei Shabbos should never by Moishavos. And what did Rabbi Shmuel answer back? V'amalei Shabbos kal v'chomer. Rabbi Shmuel had a much simpler answer to Rabbi Kiva. Neimelei and no bia u'Moishav coming. By Shabbos it doesn't say Kisavayu. It just says the whole Moishav Seichem. So the kasha that Rabbi Kiva asked him was never a kasha. So why did he have to say no? Shabbos is different because we have a kavod. So tomorrow you're right. Chada v'oid kamarlei. He was saying, I have many answers to your kasha, to your challenge, Rabbi Kiva. Chada da no be u'Moishav kamina. First of all, I never said Moishav alone means Eretz Yisrael. And the oid, the Amr Tarei Shabbos, never by Moishavos, that's not a kasha anyway, because Shabbos kavod. Okay, so now we have a clear machlokes between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. But the Ma'akamifli. So Rashi explains what's the question. We know what they're arguing about. Does Moishav mean Eretz Yisrael or not? So Rashi, Ma Ra Rabbi Kiva, whatever Rabbi Kiva saw, Shloilamat Rabbi Shmuel. Why didn't he learn like Rabbi Shmuel? The Kiva and the Chsiv Bia Moishav. Why wouldn't he agree with Rabbi Shmuel? Rabbi Shmuel has a pretty good argument. It says Bia, it says Moishav, but Arts Kamer Lachi Yushav Yeshiva. right? Why didn't it say it means that? So Rashi says the main question is on Rabbi Akiva, why Rabbi Akiva didn't agree with Rabbi Shmuel. It's mashma that Rabbi Shmuel shita, we understand. Why is that? Why is Rabbi Akiva on the defensive? So Rashi just pierced Bekundris, my ra Rabbi Akiva lachlek al Rabbi Shmuel. Avoloi body my ra Rabbi Shmuel lachlek al Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shmuel shita is understandable. That's the default. Mishum the Dorish lochem bama hana heges bekulchem. He had a very stark anchor. The whole anchor to Rabbi Shmuel's shot was that by Nesachim it says lochem, which means a bama that applies to everybody. So his default statement, he starts off with, the Nesachim can only refer to a bama gedol. Once he has that as a concrete anchor, right? So then he has to learn Moishav around it. So Rabbi Shmuel is a very good mechor because the pasuk says lochem. But Rabbi Akiva, who endures lochem, he just said that that's when they got introduced, because that's when Bamish Yachid were first introduced. According to Rabbi Akiva, why would he reject? Where did he get his pshat from? Rabbi Shmuel has a very good anchor to his pshat.
So Rabbi Shmuel's a ton of common Mishnah.
He still has to have a. He still has to have a right. If we have to make a middle,
you're asking which one.
Usually, we always ask either one's pshat. Here we're focusing on Rabbi Akiva.
The bar is coming second.
In the Chlami. So
he has to take his.
So Zok to Gemara. Here's the machlokes. Bekirvu nesachim b'midbar kimith. The whole machlok is whether or not they were makriv nechasim in the midbar. So nesachim in the midbar. Rabbi Shmuel over loy kirvu nesachim b'midbar. Nesachim were only introduced once they came into Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Akiva over, as we learned in Rashi a moment ago, kirvu nesachim b'midbar. And in the midbar and the Mishkan, they were always bringing the nesachim. The reason why it wasn't relevant to Bamish Yachid is because Bamish Yachid were not introduced yet. That's all machlokes. So let's see Rashi. Rabbi Shmuel so like kirvu nesachim b'midbar. Be'aval gav d'chsiv b'miluyim. Even though it says by the miluyim, v'zeh asher tatza al mizbeach uchsiv b'nesachim b'les hatamid b'karben tzibur hudah. You're right. There were nesachim. Even Rabbi Shmuel has to concede that there were nesachim. See, the stone wall, the anchor starts to crumble a little bit. It's not as solid anymore. Because in fact, there were nesachim in the midbar, but they were only for kabbalah tzibur. Yechidim only started the chiyuv of nesachim mibias haaretz la'acher Yerusha v'yeshiva. Rabbi Akiva tzavar kirvu nesachim liyachid b'midbar mishakarvu l'rabim. As soon as there was a chiyuv nesachim for a rabbim, there was a chiyuv for a yachid. No, they were not. But you could bring a carbon yachid at the Mishkan. If the pasuk is trying to teach us that there's a chiyuv to bring nesachim, according to Rabbi Akiva, I don't need a pasuk for the bama gedolah. Even before they came in there to Israel, they were already mechuyev in nesachim. Ulbiya hamura kan I lemaisa tzeski savoyu in reference to the Pasha of the Sochim, which is matchma, it's only starting now. Like Husker element the Bomas Yochid, Chahutra, be awesome, the Gilgal, call you that called Mugachono. The reason why that Kisavayu is because what changed by Kisavayu is now we have the invention of Bomas Yochid. Because of Latin in the Sochim. You know, it's very funny because when they came here to Israel, it used to be everyone died in one shul. Someday in Israel, every block has another steeple. So I guess in Bar Park it would be the same thing. It's right, you don't need to know that.
Father Joe. The last.
All Rabbi Akiva is saying is the reason why there was a new tzivui relevant to Nesachim when they came into Eretz Yisrael, because that's when there was first heter to have Bamish Yachid. So that's why the Torah is telling us. And that's all machlokes. So a machlokes of whether or not there were Nesachim in the Midbar controls every place in the Torah where it says Moishav. So because Rabbi Akiva held in the Nesachim in the Midbar, we have to be makar on Chodesh today. That's what it's all about.
You. When you said we,
You missed it.
Yeah. I missed it. The Baal Shem wanted to answer for all of his Talmidim. He wanted to answer Chodesh. And the Bach came to him in a dream and said, don't mess with me. Right? Amar Abaye.
And you know, not for 40 Tage got me ungekillt in Gehennen. The Bach drauf and dann kommt aus der Heilig
Okay. Amar Abaye. Amar Abaye. Chai Tana, the very Rabbi Shmuel, Mapik me'idich Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. We introduced a Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel who held that Chodesh only applies in Eretz Yisrael because Moishav means it only applies in Eretz Yisrael after Kibush V'chil. But there's another Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel that's going to disagree with our Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. And Rashi tells us specifically what we should look for. Hi Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel de la'il the lesla Yerusha v'yeshiva el hecha dechsiv Moishav in Bia. So Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel over here says the only time you need to wait until the land is completely distributed is if it says Moishav and Bia. But we're going to find another Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel that says Moitzavidaito shel Tana Acher. He disagrees with another Tana that feel like Sib Elabia lechuda ene elo la'acher Yerusha v'yishi. So this is not a different Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel who's agreeing with Rabbi Akiva. He's taking a more extreme position than even the Rabbi Shmuel. And he holds even if it says Bia without Moishav Seichem, it also means only in Eretz Yisrael, but after the 14 years after the land was completely distributed. The Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. We have a Devei Rabbi Shmuel who said, "Hoyel v'nemru Bia is b'toyer stam." By many mitzvahs it says kisavayu. Uparat lo hakasav by achad men, and by one place where the Torah said kisavayu, it specifies that it is la'acher Yerusha v'yeshiva. We can say b'koyach habininav that every time it says kisavayu, it by default means avkol la'acher Yerusha v'yeshiva. And let's see, where does the Torah say specifically that kisavayu is after Yerusha v'yeshiva? Gabei melech. It says kisavayu la'aretz, and you should put upon yourself a melech. It says v'yirishta v'yashavtaba. It says beferish v'amak shim melech. So there it says kisavayu la'aretz, but it's specifically the pasuk says v'yarashta v'yashavtaba. So that's clearly after the land is distributed, and that's when it's time to appoint a king. So therefore, you have a raya from here that anytime it says kisavayu, even if it doesn't say Moishav Seichem, that means la'acher Yerusha v'yeshiva. Where do we know it from? We know it from the tzivui of making a king. Ve'idach. What about the other Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel who says you need both kisavayu and Moishav Seichem? You should have a melech who be kurim nei ksuvim habam ke'echad. The more likes chazering the principle that we just learned, so we shouldn't forget it. It's shnei ksuvim habam ke'echad. Chol shnei ksuvim habam ke'echad ein melam. So what is the other case where it says kisavayu and it says beferish there, acher Yerusha v'yeshiva? That's by the mitzvah bikur. And Rashi helps us with the pasuk. It says vayik kisavayu ala aretz, the parish banami Yerusha v'yeshiva. And in the parish of bikurim, it says beferish after we've already split up the land. So since the Torah had to tell us the same halach in two places, which we could have known it off in one place, the Torah is signaling to us that it only applies in these two places, but not elsewhere. The idach, but the Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel holds that it does apply l'chol haTorah kula. The reason why it mentioned this halacha, sai by melech, sai by bikurim, because you wouldn't know one from the other. Shrichi, because of Rachmana melech, v'lekosa bikurim. If the Torah only told us by melech that it means la'acher Yerusha v'yeshiva, but not by bikurim, havamina bikurim the kamashani la'alter. When do you have enough from your bikurim? The moment you came into Eretz Yisrael, you were already enjoying the Peiros Haaretz. So it's incumbent upon you to bring bikurim right away. So that's why you need a pasuk specifically by bikurim to say, even though you would think you have to bring bikurim right away, you can wait until after kibush v'chil. Because of bikurim, because of melech, I would have said, havamina melech the darkoi lechabesh la'alter. The melech, we need him right away. As soon as we went to new land, we're taking over our land. We don't need a melech. There's no time where we need a melech more than when we're coming to take over our land. We need a general. We need someone to run the war. So the svar would be Yasimu aleim la'alter. You should go out in front of them to lead them to war. So that's why you need a pasuk to say, no, don't get your melech until 14 years. We're Ketzoyne and Roya. No, we have everybody shalom. Right? Could be that was a
Yeshiva didn't have a din melech.
Huh?
Yeshiva.
I don't think so, because he had to make a melech. He was a shofet. He was a shofet. Could be a melech hazivna law. I don't know. But look where the idich nichtay rechmana melech v'loy boy bikurim v'ano amina. However, other Tana Devei Shmuel holds that ish next Bam Kechad said we would know one from the other because you could have just had melech v'loy boy bikurim didn't need that bikurim v'ano amina. I would have known on my own. Uma melech the lichboish la'acher Yerusha v'yeshiva ma'abech hamelech, which is so badly needed. Nevertheless, the Torah says it's only Nageya after Yerusha Yeshiva, Bikurim Lakosh surely Bikurim, where it's not such a severe thing, surely Bikurim is only La'achar Yerusha Yeshiva. So therefore, it's extra on Shnei Ksuma Bamkeh. But the Hidduch, he said, no, it's not extra, because Ikasav, Hachi, Hava Mina, Midida Avachala Kamashmala. If it would have only said Melech and not Bikurim, I would not have known Bikurim. Just like Chala. What is Chala? Midida Avachala, Zot Rashi, Da'koil Moidim Sheneschayvu Ba'miyah. Everybody agrees that the chiyuv to be machrish Chala from your Esau triggered as soon as they came into Yisrael, even before anything. It says there Bivayachem, Vitanya, and we learned in a brisa, Mishuna biazu michal biyoshe b'Torah. In Parsha of Chala, it uses an unusual lotion of Bivayachem, unlike Kisavoyu or Kiyaviyacha. Bivayachem is a little different. Shenemar behen Kiyaviyacha or Kisavoyu, Chaner Bivayachem, to teach us that Mikilvan Shabo Nischai. They're chayiv right away. So you see Chala, they were chayiv right away. So maybe before we should be chayiv right away. Therefore, it's not Shnei Ksuma B'Kechad and Melamdim. So you have now one ton of Rebbe Shmuel who holds that even if it has a lashon of Kisavoyu, without much Veisechem, it also means only Atar Kibush.
This part already just answered why we need Melech wouldn't work alone. And we came up with another answer. You just said it before, by the Tzrichi. Only by Melech, you would have thought because
But the Gemara brings that koshke. I said, come on, Melech, it's such a severe need. So don't tell me Bikurim I have enough right away. I'm saying it's a severe need. But Bikurim, yes, you have enough right away, but it's not nearly as serious as actually needing a king to lead us into war. I guess that's why it required another retort. Okay. I'm sorry, Tosfos asks your kasha. I apologize for brushing it away. There's a one-line Tosfos, it's a small, skinny line. Leslie Hashda, Haksvar de Leil, Bikurim de B'Sani Alter. The Gemara now doesn't like that svar anymore. So the Gemara decided to bring in this svar. So Tosfos specifically addresses your kasha. Dr. Gemara, Hashda de Amrit, Chayvus Aguf, Lehagis, Bein Beretz Yisrael, Bein B'chutz La'aretz. So now that we've established that a Chayvus Aguf applies, Sai in Eretz Yisrael, Sai in Chutz La'aretz, Moishav, the cause of Rachmana, Kavei Shabbos, Lamali. Why do we need Moishav? Right? Moishav normally tells you that it applies to Chol Moshe Veisechem, but we don't need it. Dr. Gemara Itzrich. We do need it, and I'll tell you why we need it. Because Itzrich, Solkedai Dechamina, Hoil Ubenyani, the Moyadas Ksiva. Bibald, the Parsha of Shabbos is discussed in the Torah, where the Torah is speaking about Al Yom Tovim, Tiboy Kiddush. Therefore, maybe just like the Bezdin needs to be Mikadosh Rosh Chodesh to determine when Yom Tov is, so too the Bezdin would have to be Mikadosh Sunday to know when Yom HaShvi is. And Shabbos would also be in this Arusa de Lasata. Imagine that would change the Zmirs and change everything around. Kamash Malon, Moishav, Kamash Malon, period, that you need Moishav to tell you that it's standard, it's steady, it doesn't require Kiddush. Gewaltig. Moishav, the cause of Rachmana, Gabe Chela V'Dam, Lamali. Chela and Dam are also an example of mitzvah she'enim tluyus bar, just tluyus beguf. Yet it says over there Moishav as well. Why does it say it there? It says Tikach ta'chukas oilam l'doyrei sechem v'chol Moshe Veisechem kol chela v'chol dam lo'isei chelu. Why does it say it over there? Israel. So that I mean hoil v'nyoy the karbanos shivi. Ibalt chela v'dam are discussed by karbanos. I would have said bisman. Let me just finish. Bisman the equal carbon nitzer chela v'dam, but bisman the like a carbon when there are no more karbanos brought. Loi kamash malon.
The Isser of Dam says
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Isser of Dam.
Kol chela v'chol dam lo'isei chelu. It says it in the sugya of karbanos. So you might think that it only applies, this was only there when we bring karbanos. Moishav, the cause of karbanos, can be matzah mar lambi. By matzah and mar, it also says it. B'chol Moshe Veisechem teichlu matzahs. Why does it say that? Itzrich, Solkedai Dechamina, hoyluksiv al matzahs umerayim yechlu, referring to the carbon pesach. Bisman dika pesach in. Bisman the leka pesach loy. If we don't have a carbon pesach, we don't have to eat matzah mar. Kamash malon b'chol Moshe Veisechem. How about Bia the cause of Rachman Gabi Tfilin u Petach Hamor Lamali in the parsha of Tfilin and in the parsha of Pidyon Petach Hamor? It also says Chisavoyim. Why? So Kamar Him Boy the Tanya the very Bishmoel. A same mitzvah zu shebeshvila tichanis la'aretz. It's telling us that there's a special school law. If you do Pidyon Petach Hamor And if you wear tefillin, or if you wear tefillin, I'm not sure if it's and or, but that'll be a big skula for us to come into Eretz Yisrael. It'll bring the gula. So for Birish Tamil the Omar, Moishav is called Malkam Sha'atim Yoshvim Mashma, which is Rabbi Shmuel. That's why it says that when Klal Yisrael came into Eretz Yisrael, when did they transition from the mum to eating the new produce? Until the second day of Pesach, they were not eating from the Tfus Aretz. They waited until after it was Yosy. So they were makbid on Yosy in the first year. They only ate after Pesach, after it was no longer Chodesh, but they didn't eat right away. Alma, what do you see clearly from here? Akriv Oimer, first you have to be Makriv the Oimer, and only then did they eat, which means that Moishav could not possibly have meant Lachar Kibush V'chila, because the first year already they were Makbid on Chodesh. If you hold like Rabbi Shmuel that there was no chiyuv, there was no issur to eat chodesh until 14 years later. Nechal alter. Why didn't they eat from the produce of Eretz Yisrael the very first day that they moved into Eretz Yisrael? Why do they have to wait? Could you imagine? They didn't have a shmakish nickel challah in a long time. They were eating.
That's the land.
They're eating more. That's right. The Gemara, but we're going to see a hafel de gezach.
Only the cook.
But we're going to see a hafel de things. We're going to see a hafel. Alamanda rachi was even nechal alter. Dr. Mullah have a tricky. They could have, but they didn't eat it. They had them. Why would they want to eat this gashmi stick of food? They had them on. The man is so much better. So therefore, you can't have a taina why they didn't eat it. They ate them on for 40 years. Ad boyam el eretz noishaves esaman achlu ad boyam ketzei Canaan. Ketzei eretz Canaan and eretz noishaves are two different things, and we'll learn like Rashi. You can't say that it means boyam el eretz noishaves. Rashi learns boyam el eretz noishaves means after you already crossed over the Yarden and you're in Eretz Yisrael proper. That's Eretz Neshavos, where Eretz Yisrael is already a built-up land. It's not desert, but you can't say it up until then. Shekfar never Eretz Canaan, which is in Arvis Moishav, which is on the other side of the yard. So it's looks for care. The Eretz Canaan, Shekfar never at Boyam Eretz Neshavos. So what is the answer? Until when did they actually eat the man? Okay, Todd. B'Shiva ba'Adar Meismuch. Moshe died on the 7th day of Adar. Pasuk man mileri. And that's when the month stopped coming. But they had man, I guess that month didn't get for Shimel the next day. They were able to continue to use the month that they had. Somehow it was Nisporach, because normally you only got enough for the day. Until the 16th day of Nisan, which is the day of the Kravasai. And that is why they didn't eat until then. Well, it wasn't because they weren't allowed to, but they were allowed. They didn't need to.
They weren't allowed to eat mun. They weren't allowed to keep it for the next day.
I guess that after Moshe died, they changed the rules.
Well, nobody mentions that at all.
There didn't come new man. The only reason for us, Hashem wanted that to have a minute. Now, big forget, a minute is keep the man because you don't have.
True, but the pasuk does say that you should keep it. But I don't know. I don't know how they knew. I don't know how they knew. Tanya Yidach, we had another brayse. The Bnei Yisrael achos v'mon arba'am shana. The Bnei Yisrael ate them on 40 years. V'chi arba'am shana achlu. They didn't eat them on 40 years. V'alei arba'am shana chaser shloshim yoyma. It was 40 years less 30 days. How do you get that cheshbon? So Rashi shenistabku meiugosh shoytzim u'mitzrayim. They first had the breads they had baked in Mitzrayim, and that they had brought along with them. And until that was depleted, after a month, they didn't have them on. And when did that happen? So that was 30 days after they left Mitzrayim. Uchsiv Basrei, it says after that, B'shiftenu al Sira Basar, when they were complaining. Uchsiv Hin Matu Lechem Lechem. So that's when the man was introduced. Only a month later. Alma B'shisha Asar Be'ir, come on his Chaleire. So it wasn't 40 days, it was 40 days plus 30 days, because the first month they didn't have. Zok to Gemara, Ela Loy Melach to teach you, look at this. Ugoish Shoitziu Mimitzrayim Tamu B'hem Tamon. Even the bread that they took out of Mitzrayim had a taste of man. So for those 30 days that they were eating Ugoish to Mitzrayim, they had a Tamon. And the Chayim speak out, it wasn't all the Ugoish that they made in Mitzrayim. All the years of Mitzrayim, it tastes like regular Ugoish. But the bread that they prepared special to leave Mitzrayim with, the Rebbeinu put into them a Tamon. Why would the Rebbeinu do that? So the Ben Yoda says a couple of reasons. One reason is because they were transitioning from Gachmi stick bread to Ruchni stick bread. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted the transition to be easier on them. So first he already gave it the taste of Ruchni stick bread so that they would be able to transition easier. I guess because the Gemara knows that that's not true. The Gemara knows that's not true. But that's happening, that even the Gachmi stick of bread had a taste of man. Tanya, we have another brayso. B'shiva of Adar meis Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu died on the 7th day of Adar. U'b'shiva of Adar noilad. And on the 7th day of Adar, he died. He was born. And the Ben Yoyad asks, why would the Gemara at first talk about Moshe's death and then Moshe's birth? The teretz is kasadikim b'misasam are Yosy than b'chayayim. So their death is a more exciting day for them than their birth.
They get the prize.
They get the prizes. That's right. You can see they get the prizes. Minayin. Yeah. Uminayin shebeshiva b'adar meis. How do we know that Moshe Rabbeinu died on Shiva b'adar? Shenemar v'yom Sham Moshe Eved Hashem. It said that Moshe died. Uchsiv, and it says v'yivchu b'nei Yisrael as Moshe ba'arvus Moishav shloshim yom. And it said that they stopped and they were misabel for Moshe 30 days. And then Uchsiv v'hi achrei Moshe Eved Hashem, which is the beginning of Yeshua. Uchsiv Moshe Avdi Meis. The Baruch Hu told Yeshua, Moshe Avdi Meis, v'atakum avor. Come, let's go across the Yarden. Uchsiv Ivru b'kerav hamachana. V'tzivu esa'om leimar hechinu lechem tzeda. Ki b'od shloishes yomim tavris hayarden. So after the 30 days of Abel, there were 3 days of preparation to cross the Yarden. Uchsiv v'ham olum nayarden be'etzar lachodesh harishon. And when did Klal Yisrael cross the Yarden? On the 10th of Nisan. So let's think about it. If we work our way backwards from the 10th of Chodesh Rishon, if you work your way backwards 33 days, Taimem Shloshim Shloshim Yomim Lofreya, Holamadata Shebeshiva Ba'adar Meis Moshe. Uminayin Shebeshiva Ba'adar Noilot Moshe. How do you know Moshe was born on the 7th of Adar? Shenemar V'Yomer Aleim, Moshe told Klal Yisrael, Ben Me'ah V'Esrim Shana Noich Hayoim, V'Uchal Oid Latos V'Lovoi. I can't do the same daring things I used to do in my olden days. Now I can't move around so well. She'ain tam alone, which is not true. Moshe was young and fresh. Because they're blind something like. She'ain tam alone or hayoim. What's up with hayoim? I'm 120 years. What's up with hayoim? Matam hayoim. Lama chakadosh baruch hu Yosy umemalish neshem tzadik. Hayoim means today's my birthday. Today I'm 120, and everyone wins the moon. I get in tug, right? Because that's what happens. I get in tug, right? Lama chakadosh baruch hu Yosy umemalish neshem tzadikim. Hayoim leyoim umechodesh lechodesh. Shenemar es mispar yomecha amalei. Will fill the numbers of your years. Meaning you will die on your birthday. It must be so scary to have a birthday if you're a tzaddik. Tanya Rabshim ben Yochi Yomer. Shalosh mitzvahs nestavu Yisrael b'chnis hasan la'aretz. There are 3 mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael was nestava when they came into Eretz Yisrael. V'noy hagis and their noyak bein baris bein b'chutz la'aretz. So even though they're only nestava this when they came into Eretz Yisrael, nevertheless it's noyak bein baris bein b'chutz la'aretz. V'hu din shein hagu, and it's actually correct. As I darf design. These mitzvahs should apply because we should learn this from Chodesh. Uma Chodesh she'eni surah iser olam. Madi Chodesh. Its iser is not forever because the moment the 2nd day of Pesach passes, it's mutter. Ve'eni surah iser no. Chodesh is also to eat, but you're allowed to have enough from it. And v'yesh heter li'surah. Even on the 16th day when we had the carbon, the moment the carbon was brought, it was matter the Chodesh. Nevertheless, there's a chumrah in it. That it's noig bein bars bein b'chutz la'aretz. Of course, we're talking here, of course, according to Rabbi Kiva, Elayim, just isur nisar olam. once something is also als klayim, it's going to be also forever. Rashi says, Zora chita v'chartzen asur magafanim loylam. This vine is going to be also forever. There's no hope for it. And the Yisur and Isser ano, and we know there's tikdash by klayim, which means it's also bano, and vein heti Yisuran. It will never become mutter. It remains also forever. Einoidin shinago. Surely those halachas should fear, the halachas of klayim should apply. Bein baris bein b'chutz la'aretz. For who adin la'arla b'shtayim. Arla, you only have two of the kal v'choymers, which Rashi explains. Af arla ba b'kal v'choymers b'shnei achavos. Avo b'shashlishi ein ba she'ein yisur yisraelim. The Isra of Arla is not an Isra forever. It's only for 3 years. Miu Isra Anoah, who Arla is also Bana, and the Ein Leheter b'soichem Yisura, and it's not mutter b'soichem Yisura. So Tosfos asks the kasha, what do you mean Arla yesh heter liyisura? The 4th year it's revived. The 3rd year it's Arla. Pairs of Arla are also forever. Pairs of Arla don't become mutter. So what's up if you don't have the Israel? So Tosfos has a whole discussion about it. In one shot he says that Revai is also Arla, and Revai could be pointed, but that's a discussion. Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shimon says, "Oh, mitzvah shenitzdavu Yisrael chodim knisason la'aretz." Any mitzvah that Pai shows the stuff before they came into Israel, noheges bein baris bein chutz la'aretz, achak knisason la'aretz, and in the heges elo be'aretz. So he argues and says those would not be nageya in chutz la'aretz. The only exceptions to this rule is chutz min hashmatas ksafim, which is shmitas ksafim, which applies even b'chutz la'aretz. Shiluach avodim applies. Tzafal pishin etzdavu aleim la'achak knisason la'aretz noheges bein baretz bein b'chutz la'aretz. So let's stop here at 6:20, and B'ez Hashem we'll be mamshich tomorrow. We're not getting further ahead, really. Slightly. Once I'm a blot ahead, we'll back off to start a little later. But I got to.
No, it's good.